Thank you, Craig, for inviting me here to talk to you about blockchain, smart contracts, and cryptographic digital currencies. What we're going to discuss a little bit is the idea that how blockchain can help blur the lines between investing and gambling. When Derek Morton first asked me to speak, I thought, okay, and I'll look into it. And the more I looked at things from like the sports betting world, the more I saw that there was a really close relationship to the way in which investment and day trading and things like that were happening. So let's get it going. So if we think about blockchain, arguably one of the most important revolutions to come along since the internet in terms of scope and potential impact, you can start to get an idea of the force of blockchain, okay? So as we said, my name's Eileen Quenin, and I'm with Dragon Chain. Dragon Chain is an open source hybrid public blockchain ledger that was developed at the Walt Disney Company. Disney at that point decided it didn't necessarily want to patent that for a number of different reasons. And when Disney and many companies realize that they don't want to patent a particular technology, and it's important technology, they will often open source it to help that industry move further. So it was open sourced in October 2016. And the team that created it, Rob being one among them, decided that we wanted to start our own company. So we did so. Rather than go the VC seed money route, what we did is we went ahead and did an ICO, which is an initial coin offering. And it's like what it sounds like, IPOs back in the day. ICOs is where you create a token. Ours is a utility, micro-license token, sell it directly to the public. So from October 2nd to November 2nd, we raised $13 million. So that was really nice. You know, in a month's time, we could just skip right over the middleman. And that's really nice, too, because that's kind of what blockchain's about, right? It's kind of like cutting out the middleman when needed. So a few people raised their hands about excited to talk about blockchain. Has everyone here heard about blockchain? I mean, if you raised hands. OK, that's great. You know, cryptocurrencies, people hold any Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, Feather, Ripple, Ripple. Some dragons, anybody hold any dragons? Oh, yeah, awesome. Litecoin, Purecoin, SolarCoin. The point I'm trying to make is there are literally hundreds, maybe thousands, I guess, of digital currencies being created on the public blockchain and also in Ethereum. So that kind of brings the questions like, what are these digital currencies? How are they going to be regulated? Should I buy them? Will they be taxed? How are the regulatory agencies going to deal with them? There's a lot of questions around by that. Currently, there's $500 billion worth of cryptocurrencies in the world. The amount is worth that. So that's actually higher than the combined worth of the US banks for Citigroup and Wells Fargo. So that's pretty huge. So where did all this get started? Well, a person or persons unknown by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, it's a pseudonym, wrote a paper in 2008 where they described a peer-to-peer cash system, trading cash over the internet without the need for a trusted third party. So persons or persons unknown. Anyway, so Satoshi Nakamoto went ahead and decided to write that actual code and put it out there for people to use. So Bitcoin was actually just the first application that was built on the blockchain, okay? So what blockchain did was, for the first time, it was a melding together of the three areas of cryptographic science, game theory, and software engineering. So we talked a bit about like cash, right? So it's digital cash. When I think about like normal cash, right, it's pretty straightforward. I have a dollar bill, give it to you, I no longer have it. I have a bag of gold, I give it to you, I no longer have it. That's pretty straightforward. A book, I give it to you, no longer have it. A DVD, same thing. But cash can be really cumbersome. That's why we invented things like checks and credit cards, and things have evolved to where you have, like, you know, you can use your phone to make payments. You know, the iPhone and Google Wallet, Venmo, those sorts of things. So you think, okay, so I can already send money over the internet. What's the big deal? Why do I care about blockchain? But here's the difference. What banks are actually doing is there's 2 or more databases, and if I say, all right, I can deposit $1,000 into my bank account, and then the bank has to point to that record. If I want to send you $10, the bank has to say, okay, we're going to take that record and then move it, put that record so that the bank, $10 appears in your bank account and it no longer is in mine. So if you stop and think for a moment, there's actually an inherent weakness in that trust model. Because if I think about trying to send a file directly, right? Over the internet, I can send a file directly. I just demonstrate it, I can take a picture, I can post it on Twitter, I can email it to my dad. I still have a copy of that picture on my phone, right? So there's multiple copies of that same file. Obviously, that's a bad thing if it were to be money, right? That's not going to be any value whatsoever. It's called the double spend problem. So how can cryptocurrencies and blockchain, how can blockchain help solve the double spend problem that we're talking about when you're trying to send money peer-to-peer over the internet? Well, if you think about it this way, it's pretty simple. Blockchain is just one big global ledger that everyone has a copy of. It just shows the credits and debits of what transferred to whom. And every one of those transactions is logged on the blockchain. I can see all of those. The way in which these transactions are validated then, so we don't have that double spend problem and don't need a bank, is the entire network functions as such. So if you think about it, all these transactions come into the network. Via consensus, they all come to an agreement on what has transpired. So if one transaction seems to be going to one person and then another, it will make a choice between which one is valid and then continue to move forward. So in that way, you have this validation that's happening by the people who actually use that network. What happens, if you think about it, is like we all witnessed that. So if you think about it in the digital world, everyone's running the blockchain software on their node, and I give Rob a Bitcoin. We all saw that happen, right? So we can testify, so to speak, that that transference happened, and no one can dispute it. One thing that kind of helped me when I was first learning about blockchain, is to think of it like Skype or Napster. So with Skype, you download the Skype software onto your computer, and what do you get for letting Skype use the free CPUs on your computer, right? You get free phone calls. So with blockchain, Bitcoin in particular, you download the software on your computer. I mean, well, now they're just little tiny machines that humans don't really bother with, but they're optimized for that. And what you get by validating these transactions, along with everybody else, is you get the opportunity to mine coins. So that's why you would do that. You don't necessarily have to be a miner in order to take advantage of blockchain or Bitcoin, though, if you wanted to just use it as a mechanism by which to transfer money, that is. Another thing I think that's really helpful is you think about blockchain, it's just a protocol. Like TCP/IP is just a protocol. Blockchain is just a protocol, like another rail on the internet. You could consider it as sort of like being on peer with the World Wide Web. So what we're starting to see now is the native applications that are built on the blockchain, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, another public blockchain. And then maybe some will have a leg in a private blockchain or a permissioned one, or maybe a hybrid blockchain like Dragon Chain. Some also may be applications that have 1 foot on a public, 1 foot on a private, 1 foot on the web. So all these different applications are going to be start to build on these different frameworks, these protocols. So one of the ways that we can think, okay, if I can transfer Bitcoin back and forth or cryptocurrencies back and forth, what other things can I transfer using blockchain that benefit from that? Well, anything of value, a title, a will, a deed, intellectual property, firmware. I could track diamonds and other variables, my identity. So what blockchain will give you is a immutable record of the chain of title of that specific asset. One way in which it can do this, and this is the exciting part, are by smart contracts. So what smart contracts are is it's basically programmable money. So I could take an asset and say, let me put some business logic in here, some if this, then that statements. If this happens, then do that. If this happens, then do that. If you put $200,000 down on this house, and on the 5th of every month, I take out X number for your house. If that money isn't there, I charge you a fine, and so on and so forth. So if we can say that blockchain is very helpful to banks and settlement investment houses, what about casinos? Because casinos basically are banks, right, in some way. I mean, arguably, a lot of companies are. Amazon, a bank. Starbucks, a bank, right? They got loyalty points, reward points. They have quasi-currencies that are already dealing with. They're just not dealing with them very well. And that's nothing to say against Amazon or Starbucks. It's just the idea of royalty points are digital cash, but they're not encrypted, and there's a lot of fraud with them. So casinos can make use of blockchain in the same way banks can. And here's why. Because using cryptography will allow gamblers to gamble anonymously. It also allows them to circumvent regulations that apply to fiat currency. It can reduce costs for the instant deposit times. And again, there's some technical details here that I can't go into because people, oh, it's like 10-minute blocks on blockchain, but there's a longer discussion there, but it can have smaller fees. It can lower the barrier for players. So, for instance, a lot of people don't have enough money to even open a bank account. But with cryptocurrencies and micropayments, if you have a phone, you have a bank. So if someone really just wants to like load up their phone with a little tiny bit of Bitcoin and start playing, they can do that. So it opens up a whole new market for you. Again, it also offers up some alternative methods for dealing with regulatory issues. And here's where I started to think about, okay, when I think about blockchain, it reminded me a lot of things like futures trading, like commodities trading. You know, I might want to go ahead and invest in cattle futures or a weather derivative. If I'm a ski resort, but it's not going to snow, I might lose money, so I might buy a weather derivative to offset, to mitigate my risk, right? So some of the things that I see from what I read now about people who are gambling, like in sports, in bet. You might say, okay, overall, I think that these events are going to happen, these teams are going to win, but whilst the game is going on, I might want to hedge my bet with some in-game play. Like, okay, I think the Patriots are going to win, and whilst the game is in order, I'm going to make some bets about touchdown or how many yards or things like that. And that way I could maybe mitigate my risk. I could even do some complexities with, say, like brackets. I could say, okay, these two teams I'm actually going to put money on, and then as the game progresses, I can deal with those things. Right now, from what I understand, it's difficult to do that. Not that specifically, but it's difficult to calculate a number of different odds of in-game play. So with smart contracts, the speed by which you can do it, the transparency, and the trust that you can have in the blockchain will allow people to be a little bit more willing to do a lot more betting in-game, that sort of thing, which helps. One of the things that's actually really interesting and helps this idea of these smart contracts that could be done for in-game play are oracles. So what an oracle is, it's like a third source that helps a smart contract to execute. So for instance, I might have an oracle that's a temperature gauge. If it's 90 degrees, shut the blinds. If these real-time feeds from, say, BetTrader come in and a strike happens or so forth, then strike that point for the smart contract that I have. So those APIs that come from those third trusted sources can be part of your smart contract. That's where I was talking about. You have 1 foot in the web, 1 foot on blockchain, 1 foot on a hybrid. So a casino could have a private blockchain, a hybrid one, making use of all the public hash power, and then also using APIs to do some of the feeds to create these smart contracts. Okay, so it seems like cryptocurrencies have come just in time to save the day for casinos. Thank you. Okay, do I have time for questions, or did I? Okay, great. Have any questions?
There we are. I think it's really cool that you can set up so quickly and circumvent the regulations. But you know, as a citizen in the country, aren't there issues with that type of stuff? How do I feel comfortable, you know, using blockchain and not thinking the FBI is going to knock on my door?
These are great questions. I'll be real honest, I'm very new to this whole concept, so I only started reading recently, but I do know that in some of the other areas that I am somewhat well versed, that the way in which blockchain works, it can be a method by which some of the regulatory aspects, it's not that they don't apply, but there's ways to use it so that they're not an issue. For example, one of the projects we worked on, it would say, okay, so as part of this, the Chinese citizen data can't leave China. So if they wanted to do what they wanted to do, they were thinking, okay, we have to build this entire infrastructure to house this data so it doesn't leave China. And what they could have done was say, all right, well, we have these smart contracts that are encrypted for certain pieces in the payload of the smart contract to hold that data and then obfuscate some of it, but then show other pieces. So in theory, it hasn't left. So, you know, it's kind of like, you know, I mean, I'm not the expert in regulatory stuff. I wouldn't even pretend to be. But from what I'm reading and my concepts of understanding that the ideas of blockchain, the ideas of cryptocurrency sort of lifted into another area, right? The geography seems to be ambiguous, you know, so therefore one could say, well, you know, it didn't leave the country, or that isn't outside of the casino, right? Whilst I'm in the casino, I'm doing these certain things. While I'm online playing in this game, I'm using cryptocurrencies. Maybe they were tokens created by that casino. And then what you do, quote unquote, if you cash out is sort of up to you. You know, I know I feel a little slippery even saying these things, but that's what I mean about possibly circumventing the kind of things that are hold back, I don't want to say innovation because that's not a nice way to say it, but apply to fiat currencies where they may not need necessarily apply if you're using like a blockchain, a permissioned ledger, a private hybrid, or a currency that's kind of written for your specific use cases.
Awesome. Thank you so much.